So in a way today, I'm going to be talking about technology, about digital media and its relationship to the theater. In another way, what I think I'm really talking about is the pursuit of new ideas and the relationship between us, the creators, and the people who normally sit here, the audience. When I say that I'm the head of digital media at a theater, people often give me a curious look, be they in the tech sector or in the performing arts, because digital media and theater seem to be the complete antithesis of each other. What we do is all about being in a live collective experience that is uniquely physical and uniquely ephemeral and contained within these four walls. I began life in Washington, D.C., and I had the theater bug for as long as I can remember. I trained as an actor at Northwestern University, and then good, that's good, some friends in the audience. Went to Jacques Lecoq in Paris. Anyone? No? A little bit more obscure. Anyways, and after Lecoq, I took a job in a restaurant just to start earning some cash and because I loved cooking, so you'll see common themes today. And I took a detour as a chef and a pastry chef in Paris for 2.5 years. But the bug came back, and I wanted to get back into theater, but I wanted to be a producer. I wanted to be more in control over the work I was creating. So in a complete turnaround, I went and got an MBA from Cambridge. And at the end of my MBA, I was in a real quandary as to where to turn next. I think there's a tendency far too easily in our society, and especially in our industry, to divide the right and the left-brained. I had the great fortune of meeting Nicholas Heitner at the National Theatre at that time, right when I was looking to do a 2-month internship as the dissertation of my MBA. And he said he was interested in what the Met Opera had been doing with its broadcast to cinemas. So I was an actor, come chef, with an MBA, but I had little knowledge of digital, no experience of live broadcast, and I hadn't really ever produced anything, so I wasn't exactly a perfect fit for the job. But by some small miracle, the National let me do it. Now, 4.5 years later, I lead a team of 10 people, and we look after a wide range of broadcast and digital content across television, online, mobile, and most importantly in cinemas, where I created the program NT Live, which plays in 600 cinemas in 25 countries around the world now. So how did we get there? Well, it began with mission, and this is from the mission statement of the National Theatre. I'm not going to read it all out, but you can see a few key points that I've highlighted. Expanding the horizons of audiences and artists, a commitment to openness and wide-reaching engagement and access, and, a recent addition, creating innovative digital content. I think it's really powerful that in the mission statement of a live arts institution is digital right there, front and center. We've built the strategy around digital at the National around 3 key pillars. Access, simply using digital and new technologies to get our work out to more people, of which NT Live is a key example. Engagement. We have a belief at the National that the experience shouldn't begin and end with the rise and fall of the curtain. We don't have curtains at the National, but you'll indulge me the metaphor. And finally, innovation. We don't see digital simply as a distribution technology, but actually as a creative force that we want to interact with. So 4.5 years ago, I began to explore the idea of NT Live, National Theatre Live. And as an actor, having trained as an actor, I was extremely skeptical of it. I'm sure many people in this room will have the same feeling that the track record of film performance is so terrible. It's the complete opposite of what we want from the theatre. It's deadening to the art form. It's static. Someone else is choosing where we look. Yet I went to see one of the Met broadcasts with Nick Heitner and the executive of the National Theatre, and this really transformed our opinion. Not only because it was well captured and beautifully shot, but because here we were in London on a Saturday night, walking into a cinema, and 5 hours earlier, an ocean away, there was an audience walking into the Met in New York. And we felt incredibly excited by this concept. We felt connected to it. There was a sense of theatricality to the big screen, a sense of event, and we were, we felt moved to applaud at the end. It felt ridiculous to applaud at a screen, but actually this idea felt like it retained something of the DNA, something of the magic of live theater. But it still remained whether this would work in the theater as opposed to opera, because of course with opera, you can't escape the art form. It is what it is. But you start pointing cameras at a play, and you bring the expectations of a film goer, and you start thinking, the acting's too big, it's overlit, the makeup's not good. Why don't they just move off that set and go on a location? So there was still a big question for us as to whether it would work. And we treated it as an experiment. And it was really important to us that we use that language, experiment, pilot season, to temper the expectations of an audience. There's a real spirit of R&D at the National, and that very much drove our approach to NT Live. Why did we want to do it? The reason we wanted to do it was all about mission and access. The National receives about 25% of its funding from the UK government. So we have a responsibility to the UK taxpayer to be relevant on a national scale. And of course, the predicament that had always faced us as a theatre was that you are, for the most part, confined to the capacity and the physical location of your venue. There were many challenges: rights, financial, artistic. Could we reach an equitable framework with unions, agents, artists, that would allow us to actually try this, to throw away precedent and to experiment? Could we build it to a point where it was at least sustainable, if not eventually profitable? And most importantly, could we capture it in such a way that it would honor the original integrity of our productions? We never saw NT Live as a replacement of the live experience. Digital has upended traditional industries, music, publishing, but people still love to go to the live event. You can't replace it. It is the first-class experience. So the question was, could we create an experience of artistic merit, which, whilst never the same as being there, would still be a great theatrical experience, especially for those who couldn't physically be there? And from the beginning, we wanted to produce it in-house. This was a really important consideration, that we retain control and autonomy over the program. It built trust with our artists, it built trust with our staff and employees, and it ensured the quality of the results. The rights negotiations were inevitably challenging. They were built on trust and transparency, and by trying to move the idea of heavy upfront fees to a more generous profit share in the end, an idea that would allow us to experiment, to test things. It was important that the unions and the artists involved felt like co-investors, that they felt like equal partners in some way. And at the same time, I think a really interesting lesson is that we restricted the rights we negotiated to a specific window of theatrical screening, so that it was still, in a sense, an ephemeral event. A more commercially minded organization would think it's crazy not to buy out all the rights for DVD, online, television. But we were really trying to do this in the aim of mission and trying to get it off the ground, and it was about getting the work out to more people. So to get it off the ground quickly was of greater importance, and I think it's an interesting lesson. And of course, part of the reason film performance has always been so terrible is really because no one's ever invested the time or resources to do it properly. So cameras have been put at the back and on the sides and out of the way of the audience with no adjustments to lighting and everything so that we don't disturb the normal paying audience. We reversed this approach. We treated it like a studio audience. So the audience that comes to a National Theatre Live broadcast knows the cameras will be present, and we can put them in the best seats in the house and capture it in the most dynamic way possible. Let me be clear, we're not making a movie, but what we're trying to do is make the stage production look as great on screen as it would on our stages. So there was still a great question as to whether it would work and whether it would connect with audiences. But if you've never seen an NT Live, here's a quick little taste of what we've been doing for the past 3 years.
Make him love!
At your service, gorgeous.
You make sport with my life in the cause of science.
The response to NT Live was completely overwhelming, greater than anything we'd ever done at the National Theatre, really. And what was interesting to me was not just how successful it was, but the deep connection that it seemed to make with audiences in countries where English wasn't even their first language. The program is now sustainable and generating profits both for the artists involved and for the National. And it hasn't impacted negatively in any way on our sales. So thank you for applauding at James, for laughing at James. One Man, Two Governors was broadcast in its last performance at the National Theatre in its run before it went on a UK tour, before it opened in the West End where it's still running, before it did its run on Broadway here, and we even showed it on the night we broadcast it live for free on a big screen at the foot of Waterloo Bridge outside the theatre with 1,000 people watching, and all of this only generated buzz and profile of the show. Now, timing was unquestionably key to where that came in its run, But it really has, none of this has been cannibalizing because the experience of being in the theater remains the first-class event and remains unique. What was exciting to me and how we've built the digital media department at the National was that all of a sudden this opened up an audience to us, a virtual audience, if you will, who were going to have perhaps a meaningful relationship with us, seeing up to 6 or 8 productions a year, but actually never stepping foot physically in the theater. You see, I think in our business, digital is uniquely not a threat, but an opportunity. I think we like to still think of ourselves, as the Brits say, as bums-on-seats organizations, but we're not anymore in a digital world. We are communities, we're brands, and we are in constant conversation with people, and that is a great opportunity. Rather than being confined to the 4 walls of the theater, the work of which happens inside is rightly our most precious possession, but what if we can open it up and invite a much greater audience in to speak with us? Because we have the strong position of being the content owner, and although it's a cliche now sometimes in the digital world, it is true that content is king. Finally, at the National, we've sought to also see how digital can be a creative force to interact with. This is an example of a project we did this past summer called Me and My Shadow. You can look up online. There's an interesting film on YouTube about it and a whole blog about the process of creating it, which was about a sort of virtual performance space streamed in real time across 4 different European cities. And I think the area in which live performance and digital meet is an increasingly interesting area that our artists need to explore. None of this takes away from the traditional value of just great classic theater making and playgoing, but there's a whole new world open to us. And, you know, will there ever come a time where we invite people into the theater and we ask them not to turn off their phones because the play might be happening both on stage and on the screen before us? So, are we really talking about technology? I think the problem with digital or new media is the very name. What does it mean? What I think we're actually talking about is content, audiences, communication and reach, engagement and experiences. As great as it's been, and lots of people have talked about it this morning, having a Facebook page or a Twitter feed or shooting some B-roll is great, and it's new ways of selling and new tools of communicating with people, but that alone doesn't make us creatively digital. There's a real belief at the National that work can be intelligent and challenging, but still accessible and popular. Now, the National Theatre and Broadway are pretty different beasts. And let me be clear, live broadcast to cinema isn't necessarily the right approach for every project or for every production. But I will say this much. I think that those who embrace the potential of these new opportunities and these new technologies and do it with creativity, with integrity, and with a sense of mission, they will find that there are rewards to be reaped. And I think there are real business opportunities here. There's a chance for us to have greater reach than ever before. But in order for these things to happen, you have to have the right conditions. You have to have a sense of purpose. Technology changes fast, so you have to be limber, flexible, responsive, and willing to take risks. You have to put preconceptions aside and keep an open mind. You have to use both the right and left sides of your brain. So I guess it comes back to the personal for me. I've clearly done lots of different things in my career thus far, and partly that's because I have a restless curiosity, and I want to keep trying new things, and I don't want to be put into boxes. And I think that's what's inspired me at my work at the National Theatre, because it's the culture I find there. So I may not be best placed to say what is the best for Broadway, but these themes, risk, innovation, opportunity, challenge, and curiosity, that's the kind of place I want to work, and it's the kind of place where I think the greatest theatre can be made. Thank you.